everything architecture. Well, this is the title of an exhibition that is currently on show in Bordeaux, in Arc-en-Rêve. But it started in March in Brussels. And maybe just as an introduction to this lecture, it's a good start to see in a very direct way how our architectural production is made, how we think, how we work in the office, basically. So we were asked by the Beaux-Arts, it's a museum or let's say a big cultural institution in Brussels, to make an overview exhibition. And after all these years and all these projects and all these exhibitions on architecture where we try to escape almost the idea of showing architecture by making one-to-one installations and stuff like that, we thought, like, can we make a real architecture exhibition? I don't know if we managed, but anyway, it was a very specific space in the Beaux-Arts, one of the antechambres of and a beautiful plan with this kind of rotunda and 3 rooms around it. And somehow we made a one-to-one installation by just creating a field of work, that we have been making since 2003. I think that's the first project, and in the middle you found the first project, and when you gradually, like a tree, grow further outside, more recent work, and just by the plan you sometimes were in room 1 or 3 or 2. I mean, it was in a way for us very, very direct, showing mainly models, and that's maybe something that people don't know so much of our work, but it's a very important part. And I think these models, they somehow manage to create this field of work by just putting them on little tables, or bigger ones when the models were big. But suddenly you created a field of a way of thinking, a way of seeing space, and of course there were plans, but they were in the booklet, and a way also of organizing, because all these things had numbers, and I don't think you see them here yet, but because the picture was taken by Bas Prinsen, we always work with him, but before the numbers were put. But each project has also a number. And as you can see, what we also did, and that's very important in our practice, is that we mixed it with different other work. Like here, there's a sculpture. I don't know, it doesn't really work. Ah, yeah, there it is. Sculpture of Rita McBride, a painting of René Daniels. There were some small solid cutout pictures, models, as I said, but then again, between the models, there's a sculpture here of a very close friend of us. And big, this is the long banana-like room, pictures by Bas, but mainly his own work, like his work as an autonomous photographer. Again, a work by René Daniels, but then again, these plans and even the collages, as you can see, they came as a kind of all in the mix of the total show. These are very beautiful works of John Baldessari. So we managed, in a way, to create, in these spirals, you could say, our own way of thinking, our own references. We put them all on display, and for us it was, in a sense, a very, you could say, honest, very direct and honest exhibition because of that. And now today it's on display in Bordeaux, and the plan is very different. It's a rectangular big space. And so, of course, the exhibition is different. But in a way, by just, again, finding a way of distributing the same tables and the same works of art and changing actually this is a new work of art, or the collages, etc. We managed again and to show a new version of that same exhibition. And today it will, well, actually in the end of April, it will move to London in a much smaller space in the AA school. And so we are very curious, well, we know it already, how it will look, but how it will again transform itself for this exhibition. So, but about these numbers, as you saw here maybe, yeah, here you can see all the projects have numbers. And now I will show you just a selection out of these numbers as a kind of a way how you can look deeper inside the work. So we start with 56. It's also a series of 7 projects I will show that are more or less, you could say, new projects. I mean, of course, 56 is not that new. That's kind of an old one, but the ones before are even older. And of course, we start in the 50s, let's say. Huh? This is a house in Belgium. A house, well, it's actually not just a house, it's a weekend house. One day, a person came to our office and asked us if we wanted to build a weekend house in this place. It's in Merchtem. It's a small, very small town between Antwerp, Ghent, and Brussels. But they had a little house on the street here. This actually where the street is. And this is the plot. And the house, yeah, it's kind of banal house. And as you can see, the site is also very banal. I mean, this is a typical Belgian small settlement where everything is a bit messy. And also, I mean, this together with the question of a weekend house, we were really puzzled because it's not at all exotic. It's more depressing than exotic. So we were puzzled, but at the same time very intrigued. And this is a collage that we made at the time without even having a project. We made this. We did a long time to make the project, but there were like intermediate stages in which we tried to somehow grasp this idea of the client that he still wanted to have a weekend house in that space. And by making that, we somehow understood how that could be. It's a collage of a Rousseau painting, kind of Mies columns, pool of David Hockney, other elements coming together, and somehow this world, this idea of hedonism, of enjoying life, of exuberance, of wilderness even, with the parrot. This was what we somehow wanted, but it's, of course, back to the context, not so easy. And after lots of plans, we came to this. This is a plan of the house. The original house is here, and the street is walking here. And there's the neighbors next to it, of course. But we somehow said, like, the weekend house is not the actual house. This house, we just cleaned it up, and actually there were lots of kind of things built in as extensions. We just cut that off and defined a new house, which was the entire long strip of garden in the back of the house. For us, that new house was entirely different than the original house, or it's the opposite. And the original house can stay just as a kind of container of rooms for people, for family visiting. But the real house, the real weekend house, is developed in the length of the plot and defines actually almost a certain measurement of the site. Because if we go back, the site is 40 meters long behind the house. on 10 meters. This allowed us exactly to make 4 identical rooms in a row of 10 by 10 meters. And 10 by 10 meters is a funny size. I mean, it's maybe half of this. I mean, it's not relating to a house really, but neither to a big outside space. It's something in between. And as you can see in the plan, there's lots of elements that are in there, and somehow they're almost like fixed furniture for life to grab onto. But this sequence of rooms, that's something that immediately became also its architecture finally. I mean, by just defining the perimeter each time, the doors, the openings, the roofs, things like that make its architecture. And here you can see also the typical Belgian development in such areas. There's a little house and a stretch of garden. And here, this new, let's say, stretch of garden house. And also important to say is that one of the roofs, and it's here, it's more visible, one of the roofs is actually sliding. So in the section, this roof is a glass roof, can roll from room 1 to room 2. And this roof is a fixed roof, normal. And so you can somehow have a very large house. In summertime, you move the roof on top of the patio, on top of this first courtyard, open up, kind of like a cabriolet, the pool, and there's a kind of just a living area and a classical garden. While in winter, or anything in between, this roof can move and become a very compact house with a kind of subtropical garden protected by exactly this roof. So it's kind of like a accordion in a way, how you can use the house while seasons are developing. And in all its architecture, it tries to be the inside, meaning the context is so brutal and kind of depressing that we thought like, this is just how you enter it. A door, kind of threshold, a little entrance. But then the first room, it's a very bare room, which is just paved. And if you look back, you see the old house, almost like clashing with the actual structure of the architecture of the sequence of rooms. So you see actually through to the other side of the street. But once you're in, you understand that this is a universe that develops itself and actually becomes a kind of enfilade of spaces that allow you to be in the weekend house. And this is, of course, the second room with the subtropical garden that has actually even a bathroom, because this is the only bathroom of the new house, this kind of very shiny mirroring cylinder. And then again there is a pool, and of course there's the Hockney moment, David Hockney, bigger splash. So, and even a fireplace, because this is a fireplace that works between, let's say, the room number 3 and room number 2. So it is like a window. You can make fire and be at both rooms at the same time. And this is all made with a few details, not so many. It's basically rooms standing against each other with walls, and walls touching each other in that sense. So each room has the same threshold between one to the other. It's a double wall. There's a corniche kind of beam laying on top in steel. Foundation, and one room can be quite mineral or hard, let's say, and the other is more like a garden. And so it makes these kind of sequences And the corniche beam is rather, it's the gutter of the entire house. It is also the kind of rail on which the roof in glass rolls. But also in between these two walls, it holds very big sliding windows. And this is, of course, how it's been built. And this picture from the building site, it's the end, the last room, where you see just a single brick, the beam laying on top, the actual door, which is a hidden door in the plan, and a tree, which was there. As you can see here, there is the double wall with the sliding window. So these can or disappear entirely in the wall, or be open, of course, or closed, and then it's just a glass plate hanging in between these different rooms. And some elements like this one is a covered passage from the old or the original house to the second room, because, for instance, in winter, you could just go with a little bit of shelter to the, let's say, more compact version of the house. And this is the room number 3, which is, let's say, more of a, where you can stay and sleep. This is the bedroom. But at the same time, there's the kitchen in the back, a strange paravent that makes the division. But at the same time, the same roof, just a closed version hovering above it, and a space where you can be almost like a loft space, open as all the others are, with a table, and immediately also the contract with of course all the rooms before and after, but this is the last room, the room number 4, with, yeah, you could say almost a classical garden, a Belgian garden with grass and a tree, the one you saw in the construction picture. And also again in the back, and this is this picture, you get just the back of the system. So these balls are painted, but in the back we left it like non-painted, just the single-sided built. Here you see the system of the sliding doors, because there's no other wall hiding it. It's really the kind of, there you expose, let's say, the entire system of how it works. And we took a slightly more mirroring glass to finish the system. Number 78. This is also a project in Belgium. It's for a library in the University of Ghent. Actually, like here, it's not really a art university like this one. It's engineering. Both Kersten and me, we studied here. This entire building is engineering and other stuff. But here in the top is the architecture department. And the architecture department made a competition a while ago for a new library for the architecture and urbanism books. And the building is this kind of 19th century, very massive, quite enormous building in Ghent. I think it's one of the biggest of Ghent. Very impressive, but it also has these weird courtyards that have been filled with auditoria and a bit of crap. And also here, this is actually what we're looking at, is the site, which was the site of the competition for the new library for the architecture department. And in a weird way, this is the space in the, as you saw it, but a long time ago, it's actually a physics laboratory. So the engineers for physics and so on did tests, the typical student test, you know, viscosity and Bernoulli and things like that. Very, yeah, let's say scientific. but actually also Kersen and me, we were one of the last students that actually did this stuff there, because afterwards it was in decline, and nobody used this big practicum hall anymore. Very beautiful space. And so what we proposed to do was actually something very basic. This is the main entrance of the building. Actually, you go up to go to the architecture department, but the competition was to think about this space to be the library. And almost in the tradition of the books against the wall kind of library, we proposed to make an enormous new space in the existing space, an enormous piece of furniture that somehow defined almost like La Brousse, the library in Paris, an enormous new facade of books, but at the same time organizes all the spaces around it as being the study spaces, the copy room, the secretary, etc. So a very simple gesture. As well in its section, so this is a section through this big space. This is a stair that never has been realized, so we will not talk about it. But to make the library was something that is, I think, important in our architecture, is how to think about sizes, modules, how to measure things, how to finally also make elements. And here you can see a plan that is this library in all its modules. You see it's kind of repetitive, and it deals with the corner in a certain way, with the entrances, etc. And also in its section, it is a library that is actually 3 floors high, just under this weird cast iron balcony that exists in this space, and is just finally just lit by a roof light and these top windows. And as you can see, somehow what interests us also is that our definition of a new space in this old space doesn't necessarily fit. So we had to also turn the direction of these doors to be opening out doors, to be able to get the cupboard system as, let's say, rigorous in there as we wanted it to be. And somehow it creates a new perimeter, new way of being in that space. Very important is, of course, as you can see, all its little profiles in which it's been made. How it stands there, very bright color. It's almost like a boat or a piece of enormous cupboard furniture. It's something in between. And it's entirely in steel. Steel like a Meccano, so you can really dismantle it and bring it somewhere else if you want, but of course this will not happen. But in its section it tries to also somehow solve something which is typical in a library. It's books that are immediately accessible, others that are more of archives. In the back, these are these corridors in the back here. At the same time there's another level, very accessible, a collection of other books for the students, and archives again on top. This is the top level, and something, as I was saying, I mean, for instance, it's very interesting to think on how you make it. So these are just floorboards, but they are the same as these bookshelves. And here you can see again the floorboards mounted on this kind of vertical portico that makes finally the construction of the library. And here it becomes the corner detail. Even at some point it's the desk for the librarian with control to the inside and how the library is used. But also very important, again, is this section where, as you can see, how it works in height, how it can be working downstairs. It is also something that, and that was a very important part of the brief, they asked us to be able to use the library for event space. And so we designed this weird, let's say, sheets or panels that in daily use, they are up like this, with the counterweights here hanging as a kind of a frieze, again, or almost like something that again defines another horizon. But in the use of yeah, you could say a lecture even, you can lower the perforated panels, and they become a kind of, here they are like the railing, but they protect finally also just the books for moments of use in, let's say, events. So you get the stratification. And I think, I mean, just to show this project is also to show how, for us, architecture, furniture, even urbanism, they're all very related things. They're all about making things, but finally also about thinking space and how it also ultimately becomes, in this case, a library. 117. I think it's chronological. That's good. So we go closer to today. This is also in Belgium. It's a project we made for, I mean, it's a kind of abstract box in this case, and I think it's the best way to describe it as a box. A box is something very interesting. We talk a lot about perimeters, about rooms, about boxes in architecture, because they are very tangible as yeah, let's say we all know what they are. But boxes, also in our teaching in Harvard or Columbia, something like the big box has been several studios. The big box as an idea of what is architecture, even on a scale that is enormous, industrial even. So when we've got this question ourselves, to make an industrial building, we thought it's an enormously interesting challenge to make architecture also in a category that people normally they don't consider it as being important. But still 99% or well 90% of the world is made out of boxes, so why not make a nice one this time? And this one is for tree nursery in Belgium, one of the, let's say, biggest tree nurseries in Europe, among the 5 biggest, let's say. And this is the site. It's a very small part of an enormous area that looks just like this all the time. And actually, these are trees. So all these kind of blocks, they're all different kinds of trees that are all standing and waiting to be sold, basically. Because this is the area in which the trees are already in the pots, in the kind of containers. The roots are being contained. And so they stand in the field in rows as almost like make a kind of tree urbanism. And that makes an enormous field like that. And in the middle of that field, we had to design a big industrial building. And why? Well, all these trees, they need to be transported at the moment of plantation. And the tree need to be dry, because if they go in the truck, the leaves have to be dry. Otherwise, the trucks, they go to Russia, to Spain, to lots of places. So they are a long time in the truck. So otherwise they become too rotten. They start to ferment the leaves, and so you need a big hall to dry the trees. A very simple thing, but it's because of its simplicity. It's a very nice thing to think of also. And of course, I mean, I was talking about it. There's these references of Edressier paintings, who was also very intrigued by just the banal boxes. And then we made these collages, a box that is somehow trying to be even more a box than a box. And why? Well, you saw that in the plan of the trees, but the site, the trees, the urbanism of the trees was not perfect. And somehow it intrigued us. We made a box that had two straight angles, here and here, but not straight to each other, so they're not making a rectangle. And somehow that shape allows us also to house like the kind of typical little stuff they still needed, little office and storage, etc. A docking station to bring the trees to the trucks. This is a truck. And the slope for the trucks to drive a bit down. And so this whole thing becomes a weird object that has a slightly skewed geometry. And also in section, it's a box that basically just has a sloping roof. Just practically, it's good to have the rain going down and not on a flat roof. But also, inside it creates these different heights for small trees, for bigger trees. Height here is 15 meters, and there it's like 6 meters. And essentially, also a box is just two things, only two things. It's structure and it's skin. And just these two very basic things are being very interesting to think about. So what we designed is a structure which is actually a kind of inversed laminated beam laying in this weird slope and changing also in its length. It's a bit higher here than here. But also it has let's say, a horizontal side and a very inclined side supporting the roof. And finally, this is also taking a skin. And this is a collage we made also at the time where we tried to express these two opposites, something massive as a kind of skeleton, how you say it, and then at the same time something very light, a skin. And this is a material we encountered at some previous project where we needed to make a roof like above this room, and it needed to have an acoustical performance, and it's corrugated steel plates, steel deck they're called, but in this case for acoustic reasons they are perforated, and they have a huge strength, so because of the shape they can span 10 meters easy, but for acoustics, they perforate them, so they get even these two performances right. But in our case, we could just use this as our skin because the hall didn't have to be inside, didn't need to be isolated, they just need to ventilate for the drying of the trees. So you see there's the beams, there's the columns, and there's this corrugated steel plate perforated in this facade and not perforated for the roof. And we didn't know what this building would become because we just knew the sample we had and we knew the structure we designed, but finally when put in the building site, and this is how the building looks, and it's changing all the time, not only how you walk around it, the perspective, because the sloping roof, the different heights, the plan that is not perfectly rectangular. But also the daylight. So during day, when the sun is very high, it can be very opaque. When it's low, it becomes very transparent. So, and of course, in the night, it's almost like a light box standing in the fields. And everything, again, designed around that. These are 9-meter high doors with the L profile, taking the same corrugated sheets. The same door again. And the roof edge is just like cut off, this angle. The corrugated sheets are like just finished, like that. Somehow we like this kind of directness of just cutting it off and having the doors being made. Here you can see that very well. But in a weird way, this huge volume becomes also very light at some point and very mysterious because of its skin. This is a view from the inside where it's really spectacularly transparent. I mean, the amount of perforations is just 25%, but still it allows you to see outside 25%, and it's as if you have you wear sunglasses or something like that. It's just super transparent. So basically these lights, you don't really need them, maybe in the evening. And you see also how it's being used. So it's actually extremely rough as a place. It's like the huge tractors going in and out. And that's why we designed these bumpers around it, because this skin is kind of fragile to not have the tractor bumping the skin. And then they move around these trees all the time. This was at a moment when it's kind of empty. Depends a lot on the season of planting of trees. So sometimes it's entirely full, you cannot move in this hall, and this day it was just emptied, and you see the traces still of earth on the floor, just a normal concrete floor. And also just doors, again, the docking doors, the same system, just in the facade. A little door here for entering, and big bracings for wind loads. But then again, the structure and the skin, something that was the challenge from the moment we made the plan as you saw it. And this is and we've talked about Bas Prinsen, or it's been mentioned in the interview I just did, but this is pictures, well, all of the pictures I show with this white frame around them are Bas Prinsen. And in a funny way, he manages, and I don't know how he does it, but we've been working a lot together since a long time. And he manages to show us back the project and how we thought it is. And this, somehow, weirdly, I put them together, like the collages I showed in the beginning. But that's another layer that's been put on the work as a kind of way of seeing it again. And I think, I mean, in terms of going back to the exhibition and then back to the pictures, it's something very important for us. The way how architecture is represented, how architecture can be photographed and becomes, again, an image of itself. (124). Well, this is a project not in Belgium. This is Sharjah. Sharjah is next to Dubai, one of the Emirates. And in 2011, we were invited to the Sharjah Biennale, or biennial. It's one of a very big art biennials in the world. Interesting, especially also because of its context, Middle East. It's not a Western country, let's say. And there is the daughter of the Sheikh organizes it, but still very interesting because also it's a place that we don't know. We know Dubai from the glossy pictures, but Finally, Sharjah is not so glossy. It's more of a student city. And this one is actually where you can see Sharjah developing, you know, in Dubai and all the other Emirates. They discovered oil in the 50s or something. And since then, everything changed. And so there's not so much heritage. There's a lot of concrete and a lot of asphalt and so on. But heritage is gone, let's say. And this is interesting because you can see here the old structures of old palaces, courtyards, old Arabic structures here too. And this is a site for the biennial. So the biennial uses these old structures for as venues for the art exhibitions. And we were asked by the curator to make interventions in the outdoors, in a way to link one side, this one, over this street to here and to here. And actually we made 3 pavilions, one here, here, and here, and there, as a kind of fill-up for the urban tissue that has been so much destroyed. Because this is a picture of Dubai, actually, in the 1950s. And it's extremely different as what we know of Dubai today, and it doesn't look like this anymore, unfortunately. But what is very interesting is that it's settlement, well, let's say, lots of like palaces and normal houses making this Arabic city, very beautiful structure, and also the settlements around it, which are very, let's say, low cost houses. I mean, just settlements around it, around the more stone versions, made out of palm leaves. They make a perimeter in the sand, create a little space there, and in a way that's the beginning of a house, you could say. But also a courtyard, which actually comes back everywhere, is like the type of the Arabic architecture. And this, together with the fascination we have for palm trees, but also for an oasis, this is an oasis we went to visit. The moment we arrived in Dubai, we wanted to somehow escape it. So we went for 2 hours in the desert to look for an oasis, almost this romantic idea of Europeans probably that go to look for oasis. So this is one we saw. It's amazing because they also use these palm tree leaves that are made into arish, it's called, walls basically, woven to protect different areas. And so after visiting this oasis in the desert and coming back to Sharjah, we designed 3 public spaces, 1, 2, 3, that somehow filled this weird gap between, let's say, old city and new extreme hardcore development, as you can see it here. And there's like leftovers everywhere. It's very incoherent. And the old architecture has been cleaned up and stands a bit like lost in this endless field of asphalt. Also a collage we made. And in a weird way, we were inspired by these courts and the fact that in Arabic culture, there is not really something as a plaza or a square. It's more about the courtyard, the maze of the streets. And in courtyards, things can become more public, but there's not something as a kind of exposed square. So we designed in a way, almost we brought in the idea of public space through the idea of courtyards. This is the architecture. It's just 3 squares, always the same. Where you can see the context a bit around it. the other one, but based on a grid of trees. That's the oasis. Always the same, and versions of lush or less lush gardens. And gardens that were, as I said, somehow introduced in the city grid, in this kind of maze or in this weird mix of big and smaller buildings with a certain level of a skin, an architecture again, that somehow placed courtyards almost naked in this cityscape. And they become parks or small parks for the people, for the visitors of the Biennale, for the neighborhood, etc. And also, in basic sense, they gave a bit of shade in this extremely hot context. This is the one that was placed very weirdly towards a mosque, actually an old mosque here, old building that's been used daily, so people praying come out and go and sit under the trees. The same one, weirdly on a crossroad. And in all its details, again, this is a thing that couldn't cost endless amounts of money, so we made an, although it's the Middle East, but we made this foundation wall and then just sticks, some weird skin hanging on it. The height level was solved by just making it higher at some point. This is another one next to the, let's say, the center where everything is organized. Placed in the middle of the open square that was there. And making, again, kind of filling up that part of the city. And the wide beam, making a horizon in which you find this content of lush palm trees and a weird skin that hangs a bit higher here. Almost, and this is the original paving, it's like interlocking concrete. We just cut it out and filled it with sand, with some water irrigation system, and had the trees planted there for these spaces. Making the threshold. And finally, I mean, this is also, again, for, as you might have seen already, very important is how you make this. And this is a wire, or actually a spring mesh. Spring mesh we used in other projects already. And this spring mesh is just wires that are like springs curved, and they're curled in each other, and they become like a mesh altogether. And we had it painted and then installed, and it made this very simple detail of hanging the wire mesh just down from the beam, the top beam, the column. And finally, it gave this weird skin to the structure that you could see as a very transparent, sometimes very opaque, but also the play of light again in these curtains. So you get the projection of the palm leaves. This is the very lush version of the garden. So there's only one little place that was accessible. All the rest is super lush and like overgrown. It's what we wanted. But then again, an opening that allows you to enter, and this is where you could sit in between the very, very wild garden in this case. And by just rolling up this wire mesh and just putting it some kind of knot in it, you could hold them up and they become the entrances to the oasis. And this is a final picture that Bas again took. It's very funny, it looks like a TV screen that shows you an image, but it's through the maze, through the mesh, into the garden. And I think, again, as a kind of resume of the project, for us it's a very important moment, this picture. Okay. 126. A lot of wire mesh, I realize. Actually, this is a model in Bordeaux. It's this big, made a kind of very abstract model, but it has the same mesh as you saw just in the pictures before in the real building. But this is just a representation of another mesh. So it's like there's lots of layers of understanding. Again, the model is something very abstract, and we like to make models like this, as you can see, that don't try to be as real as the building. The same counts for the images we make. In a way, by making certain levels of abstraction, by in this case making it out of wood with this weird aluminum profiles, wooden sticks holding it, and then these boxes with perforated steel and so on. I mean, all these choices, they limit you so much that you cannot make it exactly how it should be, or how it will be, or how it would be. Actually, all these constraints, all these limitations make the model into a model, make, in our case, the collage to a collage, and make a plan to a plan, and again, make a real building very different. This is a project for, again, the Middle East. It's a center for traditional music. And it's a new place. It's in Bahrain. We somehow got to meet the Ministry of Culture in the Venice Biennale when we won the Silver Lion. The country Bahrain won the Golden Lion. And so we were, let's say, together on stage like this. And in a weird way, we got to know each other, and they asked us, do you want to think about two very small projects in Bahrain? We're also, after, the oil, thinking about heritage a lot. How to deal with that. And we have a lot of heritage, and actually one of these things, and Bahrain is very known, was very known for it, is pearls. Pearls is, Bahrain was the center for pearls in the world before oil arrived. And as a pearling country, let's say, they had a lot of pearl divers. And pearl divers, they have this beautiful tradition of making music when they go out in the seas to dive for pearls. And in this city, which they come back to, they still play the music in these houses. And this is a house, this one, actually, one of the main houses of the pearl divers where they still gather, and they maintain the tradition. This it's a music which is, let's say, extremely rhythmic. It's about percussion and about clapping and a bit singing, but that's it, because they don't have a lot on these boats. So they could do just the same in these houses while not being on the sea. And so we made two projects. One is here in Muharraq. It's the old city, as you can see. It's super beautiful. Old, kind of old buildings, but old in Bahrain means like 15 years old. But they're all like scattered in the old maze and how it's been growing since the beginning. And we were asked to make an extension to this building here on this plot. And this is one of the first collages we made. It's actually another collage, because this is a collage for the other project, but it's the same building, so you can show this one. It shows also, in a way, this relation to an old architecture with a new building. Old architecture, courtyard buildings, as I explained, but with a 3-floor high, which was the limit. This area has now, all new constructions have 3 floors. So it kind of mediates this old height with the new height. And also a way of building. So this is in this case, the old building with a few rooms around the courtyard, typically. We cleaned this up to make it work better, and the new extension being the same, just a room. But in a sense, it's the same but stacked, because there you get 3 floors with 3 rooms, one on top of the other. That's the old building in which you have the courtyard. And somehow this courtyard, it's something that it interests us a lot. In all kinds of projects we use it. But here we couldn't do it. And of course we have one already. Somehow we managed to make something new, which for us is a stack of rooms, you could say, in this landscape of roofs of the old city. And very simple in a way, again, plateaus, or slabs, if you want, with these rooms, changing height in there. And one room, the lowest, is the performance room, or the measureless. Measureless is a space in Arabic culture where people meet for various reasons. It's kind of you could say, a public room. Educational room, office, some storage, etc. And the rooms are very basic. They are rectangular, and they're stacked in between these slabs. And all the extra, and you can see now the shape of the building, of course, is put in the perimeter around them between, let's say, the skin of the building and the actual inside of the building. Even the stair becomes part of this kind of furniture surrounding, as you can see here, the room. And the structure, these are columns, very basic columns, round columns. It was not so easy to make them, because the more basic, the less they know how to do it. So we had to test like several times to make a round column. But anyway, it worked out. But some of them, like this one and this one, are not real. They're fake. Well, they're steel columns. They're not structural at all, but they're actually working as a kind of vertical pipes for the techniques of the building. So with this kind of let's say with the perimeter of the skin, perimeter of columns, perimeter of the box, and a few pieces of furniture, you could say, we designed the project. And this is how it looks in the streets. And again, pictures by Bas, but this was unfortunate because he went there and it was Ramadan. That means that there's nobody in the streets. So what is really one of the most lively parts of the city, in these pictures you will not see it. Also the building itself is used every weekend, Saturday evening, there's a performance. And I'll tell you a bit about that, but the little theater opens itself and it becomes part of the city, these little streets, and it's full of people, kids, old people, everybody gathers and people play music from within this building. And this is how beautiful and how crazy it is at the same time, the original building and the new one. And how it sits finally also in this very heterogeneous but extremely actually homogeneous finally cityscape of an Arabic city. And of course, as I've been saying, what is very important is the silhouette of the building, how it stands in the city and how it's also finally made, because this is another mesh. It's this is a ring mesh. You see all these little rings. It's the one that's typically already been used from the Middle Ages by the knights for their clothing to protect, in the war, for swords. But this one is very interesting because it's moving in all kinds of directions and super soft. It's like a tissue, like silk almost. So when you have this on the scale of a building, it becomes like a tissue, and this is exactly what we wanted. We want to make a building that has a certain logic in its architecture, but that you can put on a dress to give it clothing, basically. And the clothing also that is finally possible for a building in that size, because you can endlessly put rings to this, so there's no joints. You can do this forever, combine sheets of this ring mesh, and they become jointless and very big sizes. And also we designed at the same time a kind of lifting mechanism inside the beam here, and I have to go back. Oh, too much. Oh, back. Yes, here. Well, it's a kind of a roll here inside this profile that can roll up a cable that goes entirely in the mesh, and with a little weight where you can fix it to the floor, and when you detach it, it can pull up the entire mesh with, let's say, a little engine. And so the mesh that weighs a lot, by the way, it's it weighs 12 kilo for a square meter. It's pulled up as if it's like pulling up the skirt of a girl. But it becomes this theater, as you can see here. And then you see the second layer, which is this glass room, actually. Here you see, actually, this is the daily use. It's just cut in the tissue. And it works together with the original building over the patio. This is a little street to go there, or alley. And then, but when you use it really openly, then there's all these layers of, let's say, creating privacy. So this is a version where all the sliding, or let's say folding doors, are all opened. You only have the columns left, the curtain, let's say, and the floor, and the ceiling. But in other cases, when it's more of a private gathering, majlis, they do meetings, you can control the inside, first of all, by closing the glass doors, which provide you a comfortable, climatized space. But also you can close off with shutters each of the glass windows and control like this your environment. And as I said, this in-between space between the tissue and between, let's say, the structure becomes a space where everything can happen, all the rest, let's say. There's a stair. This is another room, this teaching room, at the same time in another height in the city. This is a furniture box, which is actually a toilet, overlooking already the city here again. And this is a way, I mean, this is not a bus picture. It's one we took when we were there on the opening. And this is how it really performs and works also. It's this, again, weird object in the city that has a certain, let's say, it changes all the time, during day, during night, and how it performs literally, but also in its architecture. It's sometimes super transparent, it's sometimes extremely opaque, and at the same time, the light which is in there and the tissue itself, you get the feeling of some kind of glittery silk layer that lays over it. So today we are actually constructing a second building, not in this site, but another small city, which is also next to an old music playing house. And we're doing finally 3 of them. So there's this kind of project going on in Bahrain with small little buildings. Very interesting. Okay, next building. This is a very big one. Number 176, apparently. I don't know them by heart. Well, this is Switzerland. Actually, Lausanne. This is the lake of Lausanne. The campus of EPFL. EPFL is the engineering campus of Switzerland, a French-speaking part. And probably everybody knows this building. It's the Rolex Learning Center, Sejima or Sana. And today they're already constructing here a very long building, Kengokuma under one roof. In the 90s, they made this one, this structure. In the 70s, this big part. In the 80s, I think this is the 80s, the 90s are there. Anyway, so it's been developing. This is also in the 90s. It's been developing, and today it still develops as a campus, and it becomes more and more also a very contemporary place to be, and especially by this building built in the 2000. And it's, well, in this place, there was a competition that we won for the radio and television of Switzerland, the headquarters of the radio and television. And it's something that doesn't really belong, but belongs a lot in the campus for students. Here you see the same plan again. And the site, this is the site for the competition. It's next to the Rolex Learning Center. It's not easy to build next to such a building. But also a weird building standing here. A very awkward shape it has. So we're puzzled with that space. And with the idea also of what are these big contemporary buildings in such a place, such a almost landscape-like campus. And a building that really expresses that is this one, of course. But at the same time, you get this weird urbanism of blocks. I mean, it's kind of merger of the two. And maybe our building tries to deal with that in an awkward way. I mean, first of all, it's a building of a set of buildings. That means that it's somehow within that landscape making a new sort of urbanism. But everything is continuous. So in the ground floor, you somehow try to organize students that are walking everywhere. Enormous logistical parts, trucks, recording studios, public things, restaurant, mediathek, etc. And somehow try to give that some idea of place, some idea of identity and address also. But at the same time, there's something that is, you could say, the working of such an enormous, let's say, element, which is the radio and television, multimedia, of course, today also of the Switzerland. I mean, there's lots of these things, and they are not really physical. We know them more from, let's say, the news or the television we watch, but they have buildings. And it's funny to think of that as an architect, because how does a building for something very almost like untouchable look like? And we designed this. This is actually a shape, you could say, that tries to expand over the entire site. The entire site is something like 150 meters by 100 meters like this. And we made one building that covers the entire space. We called it champ continu, the continuous field. A continuous field in which, again, these enormous blocks are cut out and start to become like addresses and start to organize the field. I mean, obvious references, but still we found them. Somebody told us it looks like this plus this. Yeah, why not? We said. In a way, that's a very good way of describing the project. For us, this was a very important image. It's, again, John Baldessari, the Los Angeles-based artist. And he cut away this big square out of this weird picture in which you somehow lose the reason of the picture. So it makes you intrigued. At the same time, it orients you different around how to look at this image. And the building is actually, well, maybe it's very simple to understand it like this, that it's an enormous layer, continuously used, an enormous interior, hovering at 6 meters above the ground floor and being held up by 4 enormous buildings, as you can see here. This is how it relates. Well, it stands in the campus next to the road. It makes entrances, let's say a foyer level. And there is an enormous canopy under which, again, you have logistics and public sites, enormous studios. It's extreme complex program. But also an enormous interior of working. And how is that possible? Well, it's just because we create daylight in this structure by a shed roof. A shed roof, like an industrial roof, directed to the north, give it north light. So in this entire floor of 150 meters long and so on, you get the light condition that is homogeneous, so you can work wherever you want. And this is actually the structural scheme. So you have 4 buildings that carry, that are being connected by this kind of principal beams that are surrounded by a perimeter beam and have finally also shed beams laying on top of all this to come together to that. And in a way, this complex composition, and this is also something we saw later, maybe again somebody told us, is not the inverse of this. So where you have this very straight forward rectangle with weird holes, and then you get a weird perimeter with rectangles in it. I don't know, maybe it's true that we think of this unconsciously, but at the same time, how the building works is extremely different. Of course, it has the continuous landscape under it, which just continues there. But at the same time, you have one big floor, like here, but which is just straight. Again, a very big floor under it, and these buildings that make very clear addresses in there. A presentation in Switzerland with the model as we made it for the competition. One is an office building, you could say, administration. This is the Mediatek building. There's a big recording studio there, and in the back, also a big recording studio. So you could almost summarize this building as a huge set of, let's say, being campus building, being public, but also a huge set of interiors, like this one is a studio. And this is this kind of continuous field where patios merge with furniture and with shed roofs, and then again get an address in a corner here, which is one of these big boxes holding everything up. Okay, last project. I don't know the time, but well, it says here. It's 8:22. I try to be short. This is a house, 130. A house in Spain. It's a house, not just any house, you could say, but of course it's still a house. It's a very awkward but interesting story. Again, it's a person from Paris. He's called Christian Bourdet, and he bought a lot of land near Barcelona. Well, I say Barcelona because this is not really near Barcelona, but this is the closest big city. It's a 2-hour drive, and then from Tarragona you go up in the land, and it's a beautiful area between, let's say, Catalonia, the province of Catalonia, and Aragon. It's just at the border in a beautiful natural area. And he bought, I think, in the meantime, he has already something of more than 80 hectares of land. And he considered this land as, of course, the start for a beautiful project he has in mind, which is called Solo Houses. And Solo Houses is where he invites, let's say, 10 architects as almost like a curator. And he invites each architect to make a house specifically in this area, in this terrain he has, and with just one simple question, which is, you design a secondary house, a holiday house, if you want. You get carte blanche. What is a holiday house for you? There is a certain limitation in the budget, so the carte blanche is not a real carte blanche. But anyway, it's a very important question that he asks you, because it immediately brings it back to you, because there's no program, just the idea of what is a holiday house in this area, of course. And he took us to the site, and this is our site. It's a little piece of the huge land he has. And he took us to this site specifically. It's actually, you don't see it in this picture, but it's a plateau area. A little dust road arriving. At the time, there was this bee hive still. So we were all the time being attacked by bees when we visited it. And, but it's something weird, because also a plateau is something that's flat, and it was sticking out of, as a kind of little table mountain, out of the beautiful nature, with these bees in the middle. So in a weird way, we were all the time on the edge, going to see the sights and the views you get. And as you can see, this made the design of the house. This is the site. It's amazing. I mean, it's completely untouched. Also, it's this side is actually Catalonia, where we look at, but here it's Aragon, and it's a natural park in Catalonia, and in Aragon it's agricultural land, but it's the same, of course. And the house, as we designed it, is a very thin circle that somehow looks for the size of this natural plateau and tries to measure it by its thinness. A ring that is just fitting on this flat area. And somehow defines, of course, a certain inside, let's say, and an outside. The ring is 45 meters in diameter and has a thickness of 4.5 meters. And this was for us, well, after lots of course, testing, the idea of a house there. And also because we wanted something that is almost so light and so big, but at the same time, it's just a thin line that surrounds a place that could become part of the house, but also has an enormous relation with its immediate surrounding. And one of the first collages we made like this, in which the house becomes almost just a mere, let's say, shelter, a shelter for being. Because what is a secondary house, or what is a holiday house? It's the main luxury is rather to be brought back to this nature and to be almost in the wilderness and to get a mere shelter. Not something super present. And this is the plan as we developed it. It's a house, a circle, carried by 4 rows, these, of columns. The roof, that is the same size. And the columns, they define sort of a square that is slightly too big for the circle. So it divides this house also in 4 parts. you could say 1, 2, 3, and 4. And one is a kind of living house, day house, let's say, this one. The others, these two, are more like the bedroom houses with a small library, and here's like a living room and kitchen and salon and some fireplace, and here you get beds and bathrooms. Again, beds, bathrooms, and this kind of playing room. And one of them is entirely open also. It's the pool house. And there is one, this is the pool actually. It's like a big surface of water that leans against the house from one side of the court, a natural water pond. And as you can see, these lines, they are not only carrying the roof, but they're also structuring, let's say, the fixed furniture that you need to somehow be in this area. And in section, the lines of columns, the pool, and etc. And then what is very important, and that you've seen already in the collage, is this weird, let's say, sculptures that stand on the roof, these things. And they are there because, well, we designed them like that, but of course, and we decided to put that on the roof, but all the houses that will come, and this is the second, it's under construction, almost finished, you will see. They are, let's say, autonomous. They don't have any gas, electricity, water arriving, and so each house has to provide its own energy, its own water, etc. And so all of these things, they are actually, you could say, technical tools to be able to live there. This is a water tank, you have a pellet boiler, you have solar panels on the roof, etc. All these things we somehow needed for survival on this spot. We somehow designed them as being these sculptures, making a certain technical skyline to the project. And as I already said, the columns, they just carry, let's say, fixed furniture. Here, in this case, the kitchen, some cupboard, and they make two lines. Well, one is the straight line of the columns, steel columns, and one is a curved line of part of the circle, the chord, let's say. And they create this interior climate. The column and this facade. And these are pictures of the building site. This has been a while. Half a year ago, maybe, in how it's been built. I took out a lot of other pictures, but this is already where you see how the architecture is. Well, and if you stand on the roof, which you don't do normally, it becomes extremely big. It's almost infrastructural, like this. This is the pool, by the way. Will become the pool. But once you're on the ground, and this is, of course, how you live this house, you understand it to be, let's say, you never see the actual size of the house. You can only see a part of it. And the height, it's 3 meters high. Then you get a row of columns that will be glass, and these curves, and let's say the circle. This is inside, not yet in this picture. But you can see also the views you make with these openings. Then again, this is the pool house, so it will be entirely open. And here you will have the glass. And everything has been designed around that. So you get the column with, it's weird, there's electricity running in it, or water if you need water. It becomes like a technical element on itself, holding the glass, and holding possibly also doors that will be in mirror stainless steel. In this case, it's a cupboard, but also in its section, and this is the water tank, as you can see, there's the glass. This is a very important element. It's the curved facade. Curved facade is something extremely lightweight. It's a curtain, a real curtain wall, you could say, but it's designed as a curtain. It's hanging on a rail here, and hanging just like that, and it can roll actually. It can roll, so the plan, as you can see it here, this entire stretch is 26 meters. Well, in this case there is no, but in this case you could open it entirely by rolling the facade from, let's say, the bedrooms to the pool house, just by designing it as a curtain. This is how it's been thought of. It's a combination of, let's say, aluminum stretch metal with polycarbonate, sometimes transparent, sometimes opaque. And this is, we went there last Friday. They're mounting pieces of the facade. You can see the rail and the openings and the curtain, let's say. And they are, in this case, sanding the floor, the concrete floor. And you see the projection of the trees and the openings that you get. Sometimes it becomes a window, like this one, towards the outside. Sometimes it's just giving this shelter. But still, this can be opened entirely and, let's say, moved around the house while you live there. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Would you like to answer questions?
If there are.
If there are.
If there are, of course.
Let's see.
Yes?
Yeah, thank you very much. I like the way the exhibition concept where the first projects were in the middle, everything was spreading in a tree way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think in a way, I guess you see your office a little bit like that, and the first ideas you have had, or the first projects have triggered ideas
Mm-hmm.
which perhaps you had from before, which have somehow always been present and revisited and reformulated. And I wonder how that keeps happening now in a moment where the office story has grown and there's been, the repercussion of your work as you're teaching abroad, and somehow I guess it's difficult to keep this kind of direct relation with the projects, or so strong relation. How do you manage that? How does it work?
Well, it's a level on it's a question on very different levels. I mean, managing an office is, of course, one question, but I think essentially it's very important that Kirsten and me, the center of the circle, let's say, we still make all the projects together, and of course we develop our own way of seeing architecture, but still essentially it's true that whatever comes in new as projects, it's something that by just having the same experience, both of us, we can refer to it to the center, but we can also refer to one other room where you have a side story and so on. I mean, there is a certain line of projects that you can see, and people say a lot that you can clearly read a certain consistency, but I think we never made ourselves a kind of, let's say, dogmatic list of how to work. It was always from how it felt good, and or how it was working together. There was no pre-assumed design from the beginning, and this people sometimes read that different. But I think this way of working can continue just because of it's very free actually. And well, I hope for sure that that will be the case still in the future. I mean, it's a difficult question in a way that can only be seen after years of work again. No questions?
No questions.
Okay, that's
So
good.
thank you very much, David, for your
Thank you.